everyone. I guess we will start to move on to the next session. So I don't know if there's a recording or anything. Do I need to wait for any recording to get started before I go, or we can just? Okay. All right. So welcome back. Quickly, I'm Edmon, and I will be moderating this session. We are going to talk about the title of the session is Digital Rights, Online Safety, and about online safety. One of the things about the topic is that unfortunately we are going back to a much less exciting topic than AI that we just was in this room for. But hopefully it's still an interesting topic, because the way that I was hoping to take it and was talking to the different panelists is how the efforts against mitigating against abuses online creates a more safe online space. And a lot of times we talk about digital rights, and that's a very important part is how we as we mitigate against security risks, how do we continue to uphold freedom of expression, digital rights, and so on. But the question remains, especially when we are in the ICANN community, when we talk about registries and registrars, what are these, myself coming from a registry, what are us as a technical infrastructure provider, knowledgeable enough or not to actually do? How do we decide whether certain abusive content should be taken down or not, and what are the tools that's supposed to be? So the question really is, we know that there are many abuses, we know that there are many content concerns, but what can and how can registries and registries deal with it? So I'm happy to have a number of colleagues, including Ken-Ying. Thank you for rejoining the panel immediately after moderating a session, from the also very active participant at the Government Advisory Committee at ICANN, and also Tom from from Net Chinese, who's also, of course, from a registrar stakeholder area. Also joining us online is Justine Chu. Hi, Justine, who's from the at-large side, which is the user side of the ICANN community. And also joining us too is Chiayo, who's from the Taiwan Digital Diplomacy Association, and to share with us some of the concerns about cybersecurity and I guess balancing between digital rights as well. And last but not least, Wilson from Line, really interested to know, as a platform provider, how maybe some of the experience about mitigating abuse could be learned from by registries and registrars. So with that, I'll jump right into it. And I'm looking, the idea for the session is there will be two parts. One part is on the cybersecurity challenges and the current responses of both the platforms and also the registries and registrars. And then the second part, we'll like to transition to talk a little bit about the limitations of the current situation, or some of the enhanced commitments that might be able to be done. So with that, I'll first, I guess, go to Chiayo, and for you to maybe tell us a little bit about the main challenges of cybersecurity today, and maybe how it relates to some of the abuses that we see online, phishing, malware, network, and so on, and perhaps what your association is doing, such as the Cyber Defense Network project as well.
Okay, thank you, Edmon. Hi everyone, I'm Chiayo from Taiwan Digital Diplomacy Association. As you may know, like today's cyber attacks usually aims at like human vulnerability instead of technical vulnerability, because 80% of the cyber attacks occur because of human error, which means if you want to let people to get into your trap or to buy it, you need a good content or maybe good visual design to cover your cyber attacks. So our association, we mainly focus on how to create, like detect and create content to defeat like cyber attacks. Usually by human vulnerability, we means that cyber attacks, they usually aims at like they would twist something you might already know, or maybe they would use some famous brand or famous facts or some facts that you already know to do cyber attacks. For example, in Taiwan, you can see many cyber attacks. It happens on line or SMS or emails, but usually I would say like 80% of the cyber attacks get reported are on our line application. For example, people might receive free coupons or free line stickers, and they will click into the DNS like fake websites, and we can see that those coupons, usually they have a very nice wording, or sometimes they may pretend themselves like Starbucks coupons and to make people believe in it is a real one. So we can see that cyber attacks are more and more creative of their contents, and also their visual design is better than before. So last year, our association have a cooperation with AIT, and we produced lots of social media posts to let people, it's more like an educational social media post to let people know about what are the main methods of cyber attacks. And we collaborate with AIT on this project is because the vulnerable group in Taiwan usually are not people who would participate in this kind of event, usually are older generations, or maybe people who don't have so much internet knowledge. So I think the difficulties in Taiwan for cyber attack are that the vulnerable groups are not aligned with the people or the industry. Like they are people we are hard to reach out. And also the content of cyber attacks usually are using local language. So sometimes you need a lot of human resources to detect it, like with local language speakers. So yeah, so I think for our observations, like to find out the large scales of cyber attacks is it usually is difficult to implement by like international organization. You have to apply it to a local level. So that's why some international organizations will collaborate with local NGOs. And we also have another project. It's called Cyber Defense Project, that we produce online courses, handbooks, and workshops, and try to collect more participants to participate in like cyber warfare discussion. We use this like online courses or handbook or workshops to collect the list of participants because we want to find out who are the active participants, or who are the people with the ability of content creation, or who are the people are really in this industry. So we try to build the community by creating content ourselves. And yeah, so I think from the civil society perspective, we what we can do is like we are trying to do it in a more local level, and also we are cultivating some content creators to defeat cyber attacks as well.
Engaging the local community, I think that's very important. So I'll move on over to Wilson. As a platform provider, what are the challenges that Line face? I mean, we talk about DNS abuse that registries and registrars do, but I'm sure there are even more, other types of content abuse that you see. What are some of the mitigation strategies that you're using and might work, and we should learn from you?
Okay, hi everyone. I'm Wilson, and I'm from the Line Taiwan and the Corporate Affairs Department, and I'm responsible for public policy response and the facilitation of internal response towards the trust and safety issues. So our challenges on cybersecurity, especially on our users' threats, is mainly concentrate on 3 areas. The first one is the account phishing and farming, and the second one is frauds and scams, and the third one is financial sextortion by CSAM and NC, I mean the non-consensual intimacy images. And for the first and second one is quite directly relevant to the classical sense of domain abuse. And the third one, while it is not directly relevant, but is also relevant to some malicious websites that hosted on some domain and is often be the target of the DNS RPZ in Taiwan. Okay, so on the first threats, I mean the account phishing and farming, I think Chiayo just clearly elaborate some cases that occurs in our services, how the account farming and phishing were made, and it often involves some fake websites on a fake domain, so that in this case it constitutes a kind of DNS abuse. And our mitigation strategy, I have to admit that since our main service, Messenger, is an end-to-end encrypted messenger services, so we cannot monitor and to peek into the messaging contents. So we often rely on user reports and external reports, and so that we can report that malicious domain may be filed in the basis of trademark infringement to the registry and registrars, so that the domain could take down and the kill chain can be interrupted. And for the second case, which involves frauds and scams, it often works like some fraudster advertise on external social network services or external sites, and then they redirect victims toward our end-to-end messenger services, and sometimes involve in an intermediary domain to redirect victims. So in this case, what we could do is that we receive external intelligence, or we collaborate with law enforcement agencies so that we can suspend the abuser accounts. And also in that case, we share the intelligence to our collaborators so that the ad itself and the abuse domain could be taken down by registry and registrars. And for the third case, that involves sextortions, that actually we are also limited by the nature of the end-to-end encryptions, so that we can only receive reports from the NGO or the government-sponsored image processing center, so that they help victim to report to us, and we can take down, suspend the abuser's account. And that's basically what we do right now, and I hope that this answered Edmon's queries.
No, yes, very useful. Actually, it seems like you have a good experience with working with registries and registrars, that they do take them down, or are you having some challenges there?
I would say that personally don't directly work with registry and registrars. So what we do right now is that we initiate intelligence sharing mechanism across different platform providers, and which may also involve trade associations and some registrars. So like when we share information with them, and they can do what they can do, like take down the ads or take down the abuse domain.
Thank you. We'll now go to Ken-Ying. There are, based on some of the discussions that we just heard from Chiayo and Wilson, more and more there are times when ICANN is called to do more, to look at the content, to quote unquote regulate content that's related to domains and services on those domains. I guess, what are your thoughts about the current work at ICANN to support these type of work, and maybe how registries and registrars and ICANN can learn from the initiatives at Line and other places?
Thank you, Edmon. With regard to the work that ICANN is doing, I think the most obvious and the famous one would be the DNS abuse amendment, that ICANN is amending the agreement with RA and registry and the registrar, and imposing then obligations to handle DNS abuse cases and the matters. I think that's probably the one of the most obvious cases that ICANN is trying to do more in terms of cybersecurity and also online safety issues. And I also want to bring some local efforts and examples in that regard. All of them are in relation to TWNIC. First of all, if you are a registrant of a .tw domain name, you are required to sign a consent form with TWNIC. And Article 7 of the consent forms expressly state that if you are conducting some of the DNS abuse activities by using the .tw domain name, or you are actually endangering cybersecurity, then TWNIC has the discretion right to determine whether you are still eligible to use the .tw domain name. So that's the first example. And the second example would be the collaboration between TWNIC and DotAsia. TWNIC and DotAsia has signed an MOU appointing each other as a trusted notifier whenever there is a cybersecurity incident or DNS abuse event. Then both of them can notify each other, and each of you will adopt a fast-track verification procedure and to handle such event in a speedy way. That's the second example. And the third example is actually what our CEO has illustrated this morning. TWNIC has set up a mechanism and a procedure for DNS RPZ under certain circumstances, like if we receive an executive order or an injunctive order or a court order, then TWNIC will coordinate with the ISP locally in Taiwan to stop resolving a certain domain name, so that people within the territory of Taiwan wouldn't be able to see the content of a certain website. So I think those are the three examples I want to mention. These are the efforts that people here locally and within the APAC region are doing to combat cybersecurity and to keep our internet safe. So I think that's some good examples in that effort and the regard.
Thank you, Ken-Ying. And I guess I will now take the opportunity to talk a little bit about what my organization, DotAsia, which Ken-Ying just mentioned, we have been working with TWNIC as a mutual trusted notifier. But just to give a little bit of background, so DotAsia ourselves is a not-for-profit organization, and DotAsia as a registry, as the top-level domain, is a pretty open TLD. But what we, of course, we are also a GTLD, so we abide by the ICANN rules, and the contract updates, changes on DNS abuse that Ken-Ying mentioned applies to us as well. So, that's additional, I guess ICANN-related aspect on mitigating against DNS abuse. But what I do want to add on is really some of the additional stuff that DotAsia has done across the years. Very early on, DotAsia has been has taken a very proactive position on mitigating abuses above and beyond ICANN requirements. A very good early example is a full sunrise program. Before DotAsia's launch, actually, many GTLDs launched to a lot of chaotic abuses and lawsuits even, but DotAsia is one of the first that had a full-fledged, in fact we are the first that had a full-fledged sunrise program, which is now a standard policy at ICANN for all GTLD launches. All of them must go through a sunrise and priority registration period for rights holders. And then again, as Ken-Ying mentioned, we have continued to work on that, and recently with the mutual trusted notifier relationship with TWNIC, but also we are actively working to expand that to other CCTLDs and CERT teams, basically computer emergency response teams around Asia Pacific. So these are things that not necessarily directly under ICANN requirements, but TLDs would do. The other one that I want to highlight as an example is DotAsia also supports the operation of the .kids domain. .kids by nature obviously needs more protection mechanisms, needs more abuse mitigation, right? And that's one of the reasons that we supported the .kids initiative and was working through the ICANN process for over 10 years to actually I guess win the .kids application, which is actually the only application to successfully qualify for the applicant support program, by the way. And because some of the other competitors are multinational companies with commercial interests, but .kids, if you think about it, probably should not have the same policy as the .com, right? Or maybe definitely not the same policy as .xxx, but the ICANN process doesn't provide that type of policy. So .kids, as part of the operator for .kids, what we've done is to build the additional guidelines and principles, just like Ken-Ting says. Anyone registers a .kids domain needs to abide by additional guiding principles. And the way that we're doing it, of course, any restricted content, anything to do with gambling and obviously sexual explicit content, gross violence, anything that's that's not age appropriate for kids is actually not allowed. And in the last year and a half of operations of .kids, we have actually taken down domain names that have these content. For example, they posted rated R movies on .kids domain. We take them down, and these are some of the things that normally registries and registrars don't do, but for cases like a .kids, I think it's probably an appropriate thing. The question then is whether ICANN should be determining, for each TLD, then have special policies, or it should delegate to responsible, find responsible registries to operate TLDs that may require additional protection. Just one more thing to add is that on top of protection, actually the .kids guidelines is based on the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child. So it balances not only protection, but also the freedom of expression for kids to impart and to receive information. So it's not a again, the mitigation against abuse ultimately is for the support of digital rights. That's, at least in my view, what it is about. And I think that's one of the experiences that I wanted to share about our work at DotAsia and DotKids that is above and beyond what ICANN directly would be having as policy and enforcing on the registry. So with that, I move on to my colleague, Tom, who's on the registrar side. I guess, maybe tell us a little bit more about how Net Chinese is supporting your customers and how registrars are adapting to the RAA changes and DNS abuse and perhaps other abuses that is dealt above and beyond, again, ICANN public interest commitments and so on.
Okay, thank you, Edmon, for the question and the invitation here. I'm Tom. I'm from Net Chinese and Net Talent. Net Chinese is a Taiwan-based and ICANN accredited registrar, and Net Talent is our internet policy entity that we established recently. And I'm also involved in the SubPro IRT and the DNS abuse amendments that Ken-Ying just mentioned here. And I'm happy to say that Net Chinese support our customers in fighting against DNS through our DNS abuse processing department. We're supported by our tech department, and having hundreds of TLD provided to our clients, we are able to meet these obligations. So also, and from DNS amendment negotiating perspective, that we feel that we have set a floor to combat abuse. So we're not setting a ceiling at the moment, we're setting a floor to combat these amendments. So these are measures that demonstrate that Net Chinese is devoted to making the internet safer for all as well, not just for our clients, but for everyone involved. And also, I'm also a CXAM processor, so in the company. So this is also a way to demonstrate that Net Chinese volunteered ourselves to make the internet environment safer for our children as well and for internet users. And regarding PICs and RVCs, just as I mentioned now that because we provided so many GTLDs and CCTLDs, so we comply with all these different commitments by our registry partners. Just like you just mentioned yourself, DotKids have also a lot of RVCs and volunteered commitments to protect children. And also regarding the cost factor, I feel that the increase for DNS combating also makes the environment safer or makes the entire industry a better place because it increases the obligations that people need to abide by, and also thereby cleaning out those who are unwilling to act on these abuses. So I feel that this is not necessarily, I call it a cost, but also a way to make the industry and the internet a better place for everyone. Thank you, Edmon.
No, thank you, and it's good to hear that it's almost like a necessary cost, and we shouldn't really look at it as cost. This is almost like a responsibility for registries and registrars. Now I go to our remote speaker, Justine. I guess what your view is on the effectiveness of the current PICs, what is called public interest commitments, and also the updated registry and registrar contracts, and perhaps any other thing that you picked up as we were discussing. Justine, over to you.
Thanks, Edmon. I think there's a bit of a lag, so I hope that you can hear me fairly clearly. Well, firstly, I'm Justine Chu, and I am Vice Chair of the at-large Advisory Committee of ICANN. It basically heads up the at-large community that participates in ICANN, and at-large community is basically made up of individual end users. So technically speaking, the at-large advisory committee, or ALAC for short, is the voice of the individual end users insofar as ICANN activities are concerned, or ICANN remit is concerned. Right? In terms of what Edmon has asked me to address, and thank you for the invite as well, Edmon, and also to the organizers. I was asked to provide a view on the effectiveness of the current framework of public interest commitments, or what we call PICs for short, right? And also the new additions to the contractual, what we call the contractual amendments to the base registry agreement, as well as the registrar accreditation agreement. So I'm going to address the PICs portion first, right? It's actually an interesting question, but if you for correct purposes, right, the PICs is what are the commitments that are currently contained in what we call specification 11 of the base registry agreement, right? So that's, technically speaking, the only place that public interest commitments reside, okay? Now, the interesting thing about that is that in the registry agreement, as I said, you know, the specification 11 is the only place where you find PICs, right? In terms of cybersecurity, right, and I'm going to just talk about DNS abuse in relation, well, we know a lot of cybersecurity elements are beyond just the DNS abuse side of things, but bringing it back to the ICANN realm, right, we are always concentrating on just DNS abuse, right? So in terms of what has changed for the PICs framework as well as the registry amendments, right, is basically just in the section specification 11, it's just to define what DNS abuse is, right? We have in the past always sort of relied on the assumption of what DNS abuse is based on what the contracted parties, and typically the registries, say, right? So now the amendments to the registry agreement actually says DNS abuse is whatever, which is malware, botnets, phishing, farming, and spam, where spam serves as the delivery mechanism for the other four activities that I've mentioned, right? So all the specification 11, which is where again the PICs resides, talks about DNS abuse, right? And now DNS abuse is properly defined, right? So insofar as the PICs framework is concerned, nothing really has changed except the definition of DNS abuse. The way it gets interesting is actually what sort of Tom alluded to, which is the additions to the registrar accreditation agreement, right? So you all know that in terms of ICANN, right, the only two parties that are really contracted to ICANN are the registries and the registrars. So in the amendments to the registrar accreditation agreement, right, they have boosted section 3.18, which is where the DNS abuse mitigation obligation lives, right? So now they have specified to say that you know, when a registrar has actionable evidence, right, that a registered name sponsored by a registrar is being used for DNS abuse, previously defined, right, then the registrar must promptly take appropriate mitigation action that are reasonably necessary to stop or otherwise disrupt that abuse. Okay. So the examples that my fellow panelists have given are very specific, country-specific. So they know what they do in Taiwan. But insofar as ICANN and the contracts are concerned, right, they are written in a very general form because they have to apply globally, right? But the attempts to now update those contracts, right, as Tom correctly said, right, is to set a benchmark, a baseline, and is intended to allow ICANN more power to take action against the bad registries and the bad registrars. From at-large perspective, we have always maintained that there are good registries and there are good registrars. So all these benchmark obligations that are being put into the contract as additions, right, is actually to catch out the bad registries and the bad registrars as a minimum thing that they must do, right? And there's nothing really stopping a registry or a registrar from providing additional value add to their services, right, to protect users, to protect businesses or whoever that they serve, right, in the interest of cybersecurity, maintaining cybersecurity, right? And Edmon has very graciously explained a number of things that DotAsia and DotKids perform over and above what they are mandated to do by ICANN in order to ensure, as I said, cybersecurity and online safety and so forth, right? So from that perspective, at large, and ALAC have always said that, that's fine, ICANN wants to do all these things, you want to put in new additions to the contract, we're not unhappy about it, right? But we want to reserve judgment as to whether they are actually going to be effective or not, because we have yet to see the results. And to be fair, the new amendments only came into effect on the 5th of this month. So we really need a reasonable progression of time, right? And also to see the new reports coming out of ICANN contractual compliance to see whether the amendments are effective or not, right? One signal of effectiveness would be that ICANN is taking action against recalcitrant registrars and registries. That would be one clear signal that it has worked. But we're not there yet, right? And in terms of we have to set a baseline as to what we want to assess, right? And we agree to that. The at-large committee agrees to that, right? But we also want to see, and again, over a progression of time, right, the evolution of the definition of DNS abuse. We are pretty sure that, and I hate to use this word, right, malicious actors tend to be very innovative. I hate using that word innovative when describing malicious actors, but I can't find a better word in this instance, right? So I have to use it, right? So malicious actors keep coming up with innovations as to, committing DNS abuse, committing fraud, committing all the bad activities, right? So we need to make sure that ICANN is also in step with those evolution, right? To put themselves in a position to meet increasing innovative challenges that are thrown out there by or perpetrated by the malicious actors. So there's something that the ALAC and the at-large committee have always stood for, right? In addition, Tom alluded to some of the interesting measures that Net Chinese has taken. Ken-Ying has also mentioned certain activities that TWNIC is doing, right? And in conjunction with DotAsia, right? The trusted notifier partnership kind of thing. So from where we stand, right? Even though ICANN may want to target at like a benchmark standard for practice or for running a TLD, insofar as DNS abuse is concerned, right? There are other things that we think that ICANN can push along, right? It's just a question of whether they want to or not, or they will, right? Things like, and some of these things are generally good for business anyway, right? Like know your customer practices. That would help you possibly identify bad actors ahead of time. So we're looking at preventive measures as opposed to cure, right? So you want to try and prevent DNS abuse from happening before it happens, as opposed to taking action, right? And then trying to mitigate from after it happens, right? And we all know that mitigation comes with a whole set of challenges, even from a registry and a registrar perspective, like how many people actually know what to do when they see an abuse? Do they report it, right? And even if they report it, they have to be able to show enough information, enough evidence for the contracted party to act on, right? And also ICANN, right, as I said before, ICANN only deals with registries and registrars. Those are the only two groups of parties that are contracted to ICANN. So the reach that ICANN has is only up to the registrar. Right? From there downline, the ISPs, the web hosters, ICANN cannot reach them. So it is up to our partners, the ICANN partners, in terms of the registrars, right, and downline, to try and help the process of mitigation of abuse. So other things like we think might help also is to look at bulk registrations, right? So if you imagine that bulk registration is one source or one logical source of malicious actors, registering a whole bunch of domain names to perpetrate abuse, right? And I believe ICANN is trying to study the impact of bulk registration vis-a-vis DNS abuse. So it'll be interesting to see what they report on when they complete the study. Right? Things like AI-powered tools to detect, to predict which domain names might be abusive. Potentially, that could be one way of helping, the registrars or the resellers or whoever who signs up, the registrants, right? And definitely, Chiayo mentioned this, and of course, this is her core area or expertise, I guess, right? User and registrant education, right? Cyber hygiene practices. We need to keep on inculcating those in internet users, right? And you'd be surprised that, Chiayo made a point that, the vulnerable may be more vulnerable to DNS abuse, right, and scams and what have you. But I won't be surprised that the younger generation is also like that, because if you grow up accessing the internet, right, and you don't have a culture of verifying the sources of information that you look at, then you are also vulnerable in many sense, right? And the last thing could be like partnerships, collaboration for trusted notifier purposes, right, not even within the country, but within the region, right, and preferably globally as well. So those are kind of things that we should, the ALAC and at large hoped that ICANN could push along and pursue in their constant, negotiations and legal negotiations of the contracts, and how the contracted parties should be managing their businesses. So I'll stop there, Edmon. Thanks.
Thank you, Justine. And you've already taken us into the second question that I was going to talk about, which is what further, how do we further improve or enhance what we have now? But I did want to open quickly the floor if there are any questions or comments about how registries and registrars are doing right now, because one of the things, what I am hearing at least, I know, Justine, you said we're not quite there yet, but at least we're going down the right path. A few years ago, there were a lot of discussion about registries and registrars and ICANN not doing enough to mitigate against DNS abuse, but it seems like we're on the right track, and I see Joe Fan at the mic, so I'll pass it to the mic here.
Thank you, Edmon. I think it's, when we talk about the DNS abuse, ICANN, I think it's quite clear that ICANN is always thinking that the content, on the, domain, it should not be their business, right? So, but we can also see, the CCTOD and also some just like the kids or the Asia. Actually, the TOD, operators, they try to move on, move forward a little bit, and also to have some, some more, take more risk, for them to, to protect or respond to, more like public interest. Do you think is also we see the trend like the platforms, they now are requested by the legislations, to have more like accountable, to do more. Even it's out of their business, they even cannot decide, what is the content, is it illegal or not, but they are requested to do so. So do you think, especially because you are in the ICANN board, do you think is worthy, for the ICANN to reconsider? Is there anything, for ICANN to do, to maybe to push, I mean, or just to, just to push the registry or registrar to move forward, I mean, so that they can also to, start to think about, how to respond to these needs.
Thank you, Yofan. I will not directly respond first, but the short answer is always yes. As I think Justine has mentioned, we should always look further, how we can enhance. I'll come back to answer a bit more, but I wanted to go to actually building on your comment and question. Ken-Ying, I know that you also have voiced a suggestion for ICANN to do more, especially addressing content abuse, and through contracts with registries and registrars. Recently, one of the big hot topic at ICANN is the registry volunteer commitments, or what we call RVCs. How do you think, ICANN can do that? Is that the right approach? And, what are some of the current limitations and changes that we might need?
Well, thank you. This is really a tough question. As a member of the GAC, like the other governments, we want ICANN to handle more matters for the government and for the people. That's our hope. But after reading Professor Moulton Miller's article and all the dispute and discuss doing in Puerto Rico, I have the chance to look into more about the situation and rethink about what's going on. For example, when the US representative asked this question to all of the GAC members, the European Union raised hand first. We thought they have a wonderful solution or comment, but they actually raised hand to ask whether ICANN has asked its lawyer whether it's permissible to regulate content based on its bylaw. And the EU representative want a legal opinion on that. So, so we need to sort of take one step back to actually look at the documents about what ICANN can do and cannot do. So I took some minutes to reread the bylaw of ICANN. It indeed said that ICANN shouldn't regulate content unless the purpose is in line with what expressly stated in its mission. So its mission is about to set up a uniform and a coordinated approach to facilitate the openness, interoperability, resilience, security, and the stability of DNS system. So of all these keywords and terms, and also not until today I entered this room, I realized that security is somewhat different from safety. Online security and online safety are actually two different concepts. So legally speaking, but I need to qualify. I'm not a California lawyer. I'm just a legal person who reads English. So legally speaking, I think that ICANN may be barred by its bylaw from doing more, especially in terms of content moderation. And I know that within the community, there's one voice that we can do it if registry voluntarily doing it, like what we are doing locally in Asia, like the trusted notifier. Then ICANN is not regulating it. So if we can promote that the registry voluntarily do more, then ICANN wouldn't be barred from doing all this activity like facilitating or promoting the activity. So from legal point of view, I would think that's probably some of the direction that we need to think about. But I think voluntary, that means no consequences. So the consequences need to come from somewhere else. Maybe not from the contract, but something else we need to think about.
Like a gold star, or take your gold star away. No, but that is precisely, I think, the question that ICANN and the community is faced. And Zhou also mentioned that local legislations might come into intervene as well. And so now I go to Wilson. I mean, as a platform, of course, you're not, under ICANN, so you can probably do a lot more, and your users are probably asking you to do even more about content regulation or moderation. So how's the work at Line?
Yes, we are often asked by our government and users to have more content moderations, or in our cases, sometimes it involves moderating the user activity, actually, because we cannot directly moderate the end-to-end encrypted contents. So, of course, we maintain collaborations with law enforcement agencies and the government agencies, and we revise our content policies and our relevant trust and safety mechanisms to accommodate these requests. But we often face with some very interesting and critical dilemma. For example, when we often deal with fraud, and which involves suspension of abuser accounts, and sometimes that conflict with our other regulations in Taiwan, I mean the consumer protection regulations, that prohibits us to arbitrarily suspend users' accounts. So in this case, we have to properly demonstrate and to properly reserve evidence, so to show, especially when our decision was, was complained by the users. And in these, and I think maybe I'm not really sure about the ICANN's policy. I'm sorry, but I only have a rough understanding. But I think ICANN may face similar issues here. And also we are talking about the content moderations here, but sometimes some content still related to domain abuses. For example, just like the case we just shared about the account phishing and farming cases, that our experience on this is that I hear this from my security colleagues. I don't know the exact details, but he told me that the current mechanism, especially from via GP search, is that the domain takedown process is a little bit tricky, because it's also very hard to demonstrate why this domain has been abused, and we have to show that the domain is not hijacked, it's initially being abused by the abusers, and that's make things more tricky. And however, in the ordinary cases like these frauds, I think the collaborations is much easier, because we in Taiwan society we maintain some higher level of trust among our law enforcement agencies, and also they have the investigative power to know the external intelligence to properly demonstrate the abusing behavior, so that we can properly take down our abuser accounts, and maybe domain registry and registrar trust can do their own. So my very rough assessment on the issues is that although we just build the mechanism, I heard one of our previous discussion, and I believe the logistics on how to properly demonstrate the abusing is the hardest part, and we need some smoothing process for that.
Right. I guess the kind of burden of proof, unfortunately, is on the reporter reporting the abuse, which is the situation, I guess, with DNS abuse in some sense, because I guess then that segues me into Chiayo, is as registries and registrars, we might not know whether taking something down might actually affect some other digital rights Of course, we want a safer internet, but what do you think? You know, what from, I guess, from a civil society perspective, you know, how much do you trust us as platforms and technologists to determine what's the, you know, abusive content? Is that going to have an implication on freedom of expression?
Oh, okay. Because we're an NGO, but I would like to say my personal opinion first, because if you are buying a domain, it's like you going into a restaurant, you have to follow the rules of the restaurant. If you violate the rules of the restaurant, you should go out. I mean, so my personal opinion, I think it's reasonable that users have to follow the policy that regulated by ICANN or local domain institutions. And from NGO perspective, we would say we would like to see a more transparent standard or the report process. Because we, like, to be honest, I don't really know about what is the report system to ICANN if I found abuse of DNS. Because I know TWNIC, so maybe I would go to TWNIC first. And I think for the report system, just like what I have mentioned in the previous questions, because the vulnerable groups, they are sometimes like older generation or people who don't have so much internet knowledge. So maybe the report system, we have to think about how to make it easier, it can be easy to access by everyone, or how to make it to a local level. For example, I know many nonprofit organizations in Taiwan, they use Line as a report system. If you find some like fraud group, SMS, or fraud message or fraud message online, you can just open the Line chatbot and type in and report it. For the general public, it is a much easier way to report the abuse of DNS. But for but I know ICANN has another system. So I think nonprofit organizations' roles would be like we have to translate or interpret the process to the general public, or we can try to build easier channels for the general public to use it. And so I think what ICANN can do is like we can try to build more relationship with local NGO or local government, even local enterprises. Just try to recognize who are the stakeholders might engage in this process and try to build relationship with them and make some local service and try to make the system easier and the process shorter. This is my recommendation. Thank you.
No, thank you very much. I think the idea of transparency reporting is quite interesting, and I'm going to Justine next, and maybe that's something, Justine, you already suggested a few additional, but please add to that, and what do you think about Chiayo's suggestion on transparency reporting? What was taken down? I think there is some reporting that registries and registrars are required, but I don't think it's about that kind of transparency. What are your thoughts? And please add.
Sure. Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, ICANN contractual compliance does do some kind of reporting for DNS abuse reports, right? But we don't necessarily see the granularity of each report. So we have general indications of certain things, right? And that's how ICANN contractual compliance has always done their reporting, as far as I know, anyway, right? Just to wind back a little bit, right? So I talked about the registrar new obligations in respect of DNS abuse, mitigating DNS abuse. I should also mention that there is a complement new provision in the registry agreement that also allows registries to take reasonable action or action that they deem reasonable. And then, the contract actually says, provides some examples, right? But we're not going to go into specifics. But what I was trying to point out is that, so both now the registries and the registrars are mandated to do something about DNS abuse. If they are satisfactorily, they are satisfied that the DNS abuse claim can be made out. So that's where it goes back to the reporting. Whoever who observes or experiences DNS abuse does the reporting. Number one, they must do the reporting. If we don't have a report of it, then we don't have anything to go on, right? Then the report or the claim has to be sufficiently complete for either of the contracted parties to do something about it, right? So, and that is, as someone mentioned, a very, very high challenge, because DNS abuse, if you're talking about taking a snapshot of something, right, the malicious actors are typically faster than you, right? So once you report something, it disappears. And that's what makes it hard to trace, right? And why that is why also that it's necessary to do mitigation once something bad has happened, but that's why we feel that it's also important to do prevention, right? And to try and identify malicious actors beforehand and stop them from perpetrating abuse, right? The other thing I wanted to mention about something that Ken-Ying said. Now, there are two schools of thought, and I have the benefit of knowing these things because I've been involved in the discussions that the board is leading in terms of creating PICs and RVCs framework for the next round, right? So in terms of PICs, right, we see that as mandatory commitments. So mandatory commitments are things that are already in the base registry agreement, and they're mandatory, right? So that they have to be complied with. Voluntary, in terms of the registry voluntary commitments, right, RVCs, right, they're not voluntary in the sense that they don't have effect. They are voluntary in the sense that they are not foisted down by ICANN as mandatory commitments, but they are volunteered by the registry to do certain things, right? So the voluntary bit of it, right, is registries volunteering or applicants volunteering. So it's not to say that ICANN will voluntarily not enforce it, right? So the whole point is any commitments, whether it's mandatory or voluntary, right, if they end up in the contracts, then ICANN has made a commitment that they will be enforced. Right? Going back to this question about whether ICANN can regulate content or not, there are kind of two schools of thought. One is, the extreme side of things is that they say, just don't touch content. Anything to do with mention of content, just don't touch it. Right? There's the other side of the community that says that, doing something that involves, say, for example, taking away or taking down harmful content is not necessarily regulating content. Okay? Regulating content is more like, you are not allowed to post something or other. Okay, maybe that's a bad example, but what I'm trying to get at is that you have to separate, insofar as ICANN's mandate is concerned, right? You separate, and we are suggesting this as the ALAC as well, right? You separate monitoring from enforcement. Okay, don't put the two together. Once you can see from two sides, right, then we can say ICANN is only responsible for enforcing what is in the contract. If the commitment in the contract says that the registry volunteered to do something about taking down content or what have you, that is their right. I mean, as a registry, they want to commit to some kind of commitment like that. That's fine, But the only way ICANN can enforce that commitment is that somebody tells ICANN that the registry has not complied with it, has breached that commitment. So that's where we come to the introduction of a third-party monitor that the ICANN board has been mooting, right, to take away the monitoring function from ICANN so that it does not breach the ICANN bylaws. It does not conflict with the ICANN bylaws, however you want to say it, in terms of regulating content. So if you separate the monitoring and the enforcement, right, ICANN is only enforcing a breach of contract. Right? Whoever monitors whether the registry is complying with that commitment, that is not going to be ICANN's responsibility, except for the DNS abuse commitments already in the mandatory section of the RA. Right? So if you can again, see those two roles as separate, monitoring and enforcement, right? And perhaps introduce a go-between, a third party, authoritative third party, by which their determination can be used by ICANN to stipulate that an RO has breached a contract. Then ICANN can enforce that contractual commitment, right? Simply put, I'll use a second level argument, right? In terms of domain name, UDRP. I think everyone's familiar with UDRP, right? Typically, contravention of a trademark, someone's trademark, right? You would take out a UDRP claim, right? So again, ICANN is relying on the UDRP provider and the panelists to make that determination that somebody has breached something to do with the trademark obligations, right? So ICANN uses that determination, the UDRP panelist determination, to enforce the contract. To say that, or registrar or registry, you have to do something about it because the UDRP panelists say so. So it's as simple as that. So in terms of whatever registries want to volunteer as a commitment, if it's actionable, right, and it doesn't require ICANN to determine whether somebody has put up something abusive content or undesirable content, but pass that responsibility to a third party, then ICANN is not contravening its bylaws.
Thank you, Justine. I think you helped answer Jofan's question to me, because I actually have a very similar view. Jofan, you asked whether ICANN should do more. And first of all, I cannot speak for the ICANN board. I'm speaking personally here. But I do think ICANN can do more. But it is in terms of enforcement of registries or even registrars making those commitments and seeing through that they actually do it. I don't think ICANN should be an adjudicator at all for content, which is the content regulation that Justine also mentioned. So I hope that answers your question a little bit. So thank you, Justine. You helped me answer this very difficult question very clearly as well, I hope. But you also mentioned, and I guess others are, everyone is asking our registrars to do more, to do not necessarily pre-crime, but prevention, know your customers. I guess going to Tom. Before I go to Tom, actually, I see that the actual time has run out, but in my countdown clock right here, I still have 9 minutes. Okay, I guess because we started late. But right after Tom, I'll be going to the floor for any questions and comments. But Tom, everyone is looking to you, to the registrars to do more. What do you see, the future? How do you deal with that? And what are your thoughts?
Just as I spoke now, NetChina is also dealing with CSAM, but processing CSAM. So many of our industry partners are doing the same, just that they don't outspeak on it, because many times when we speak out on what we do or when we start giving out information, bad actors pick up on that and then they advance their methods, and then therefore, a lot of the times we collaborate with our industry partners to act on these bad actors without openly speaking about them, because the more information we provide, then the faster they learn, then the harder it is for us to act on these bad actors. And I see Wilson here keep on nodding on what I'm saying. So I feel that it is not just a domain name industry collaboration, but an internet industry collaboration as a whole would be more helpful. And I'm also looking towards to ICANN to see when we've already implemented the DNS abuse amendments, if it's possible to have some form of honorary incentive, just like maybe some form of gold star that that you've mentioned, Edmond, to say that these are actors of DNS abuse actors, yeah. So maybe that's also a form of incentive to promote DNS abuse amendments further. So these are just some thoughts on feedback, because I feel that in order to make the internet safer for everyone, that it is an effort by the entire community, not just the private sectors, but everyone needs to work together to make the internet safer. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. With that, I'd like to open the floor up to questions or comments, because this is a topic that I think is very important. Registries and registrars and the ICANN community is very much interested in making sure that they, contributing to mitigating against all sorts of abuse, and of course the safety, users' safety online. But there are limitations to what we do, and there, transparency might not always be the best approach there, as I think my fellow panelist has mentioned. So I'm looking at the room and not seeing anyone jumping to the mic, and seeing that we're theoretically over, but I guess I'll go to my panelists for a last closing remark, maybe starting from Ken-Ying all the way through the table, and then back to you, Justine. Ken-Ying?
Yes?
Very short, brief, a sentence or two, kind of.
Well, I support that I can do more. But it must be handled in a very careful way, that within the boundary of the bylaw, and also respect the freedom of speech and the national laws. So that's my remark.
Tom?
I'm happy to be part of Net Chinese, who's doing more than what our contract obligations are saying, and also proud to be a part of the random industry partners who are actually doing more than our contract obligation, and look towards to ICANN as well to see what incentives can they provide for us to do more as well. Thank you.
You, Chiayo?
Yeah. I would say NGO can be the bridge for registrar or registry between the users, and we can interpret or translate information or make it to a local level, and we hope to build more trust community with ICANN in the future.
Wilson?
Okay. My personal reflection on the previous discussions, I find it interesting to there is a parallel between the ICANN process you just discussed on the voluntary commitment and the current regulation trends that requires platforms to voluntarily commit something to mitigate the risk occurs on our platform surface. On the one hand, I do appreciate we have some sort of autonomy to determine what we can do based on the nature of our services. But on the other hand, I would say that there is still some maybe contractual enforcement or some legal obligations of violations on the voluntary commitment, and sometimes it may resolve some discrepancies, especially when I'm not very familiar with ICANN's bylaw. I'm start reading on it, but I'm just curious about is such enforcement may still trigger the prohibitions of the don't touch the content, the prohibition of don't touch contents, and I'm just reflecting on whether such discrepancies or dilemma may also occur in the regulation trends on our platform services. But that's an open question, and I don't think we can address this quite in a very short time. So please.
Yeah, I think we won't be resolving it here, but it is a pertinent question, and it, as you said, in parallel, both platforms and registries and registrars are asked to really, try to think through that particular question. Justine.
Thanks, Edmon. So, just to sum up, right? I agree with Ken-Ying that I think ICANN can do a lot more. That's the belief that at large community has as well. It's a good start in terms of the new amendments to the contractual agreements. Let's see where they take us. We have yet to see as I said, the impact of it, right? So we'll be very interested to find out the impact of it. In terms of, I also applaud the fact that there are registrars and registries that do a lot more than what is expected of them. Right? So that, I think that is great, because that is a way to differentiate your business from others. Right? And as I said, in terms of the contractual obligations, right, they are a benchmark, and they are there to catch the bad actors, not the good actors, right? Because we know the good actors are always going to do more than they are expected to. Right? And in terms of the RVC framework moving forward, I think it's yet to be quite clear in terms of how registry voluntary commitments are going to be formulated, right? Whether the community is going to have some way to input on those, whether they think it's a good idea or a bad idea. We have given suggestions. The community has been asked to give the suggestions, and some parts of the community have complied with that suggestion and given input. But I think at the end, and this is my personal opinion, I think at the end of the day, whether something goes into a contract as RVC, I think that's something that the ICANN board will have to examine, right? And they will have to examine factors like the risk that if it touches on content, right, the risk that they might violate the bylaws, and then the risk of anyone taking litigation against that action, right? So they have to make sure that whatever they decide to put in the contract has to have a satisfactory level of risk that they're happy with, that they won't incur litigation, they won't trigger litigation. But that shouldn't stop them from being bold, right? And make it work, make this framework work, because it is for the betterment of the entire global community. Thank you.
Thank you, Justine. And I guess I find the discussion really useful. 2 years ago, when I first joined the board, DNS abuse was the #1 issue. Everyone was pressurizing the board and ICANN to take action. I'm happy to say that. I guess I contributed to part of it. It seems like now we are on the right track. Of course, it still remains to be seen. So maybe this seems like we should pick this up again next year, again here, and see where we are at that point, and what else, what addition we'll do, and take stock of what worked and what didn't. But with that, thank you all my panelists, and please join me in a round of applause to everyone. Thank you.